Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again, and it's turbulence time. And nice to be back again, Dave. These fortnightly slots are flying past like days, mate.
Yeah, it's like our lives, huh? And my life particularly, it just flew by, and I keep wondering, whatever happened to that kid at 21? I look in the mirror and I'm looking for him, and I see this old guy I don't remember. I don't know.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it, mate. It's terrible, isn't it? Well, look, here we are again, and we're blimey, you just made me think of something there. I was gonna say, here we are again, it's chapter 9, session 10, and we were supposed to be doing advance in technology. But you know what you just said there about life flashing past you? I think we should go off-piste here. And I've been thinking about this, where you said to me earlier on about, this all started that day you woke up in the bed after a brain aneurysm. And I've been thinking to myself, we should make a film or a box set about this and have a bit of fun with a 5-decade review of what happened historically in the aviation industry, but also some of the stories and the things that have happened to you. And obviously, if we were lucky enough to be able to do that, we'd be able to embellish it a little bit with some of the, we could spruce it up a little bit, although I'm pretty sure it wouldn't need sprucing up, but just to save you any blushes, we could do that. But seriously, David, I think I've watched things on television now so much in this lockdown, and I just think what a wonderful thing to bounce back and forth with historic issues and historic events that have influenced the business, but also having a life of 50 years within the business and seeing all those things. What do you reckon?
Well, what's interesting about that idea, Chris, is that if you just talk about the industry, it's very interesting, and you see lots of documentaries, and you see lots of, not very many movies or series, by the way.
Yeah.
And one was started, and it really didn't do well because it was off point and it wasn't realistic. And that was the original Pan Am series that lasted 1 year.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't on point, and it was. But if you take a look at the combination of what I've seen in the past 50 years and what the world has seen and the industry has seen in the past 50 years, and then you combine that with me kind of in between, I'm like the bookends. In other words, we're going down two paths, the industry path and my path. They happen to be the same path. Except that rather than just what the industry has done on the 747 as an example, I jump in and tell a couple of 747 stories that are real. So it would be interesting. And you're right. When I was lying in that bed, the first 5 days, I was in the dark because you couldn't turn on a light without pain. So I'm sitting there in and out of darkness and in and out of quasi coma and being juiced up, I must admit to you. And going through all the different aspects of my life, and then thinking about the luminaries and the people in the industry, the drama, the excitement, the fun, the danger, the exotic nature of the industry. And then I'm right in the middle of it in both practical terms, management terms, decision-making terms, frankly, personal as well. I mean, like the madmen of the 70s and 80s, try to be an airline guy, half decent looking guy with some good positions, dealing with the people that I dealt with and the people that I've met, not just the Hollywood crowd, but around the world. And then the beautiful flight attendants. And
you had a little segue there, David, into what the fruity or the juicy bits could actually be, my friend. And
well, there's a lot of that, good, bad, or indifferent. And there's days when, it's really interesting, Chris, just to follow your lead here. When you go back and take a look when you're 50 or when you're 60 or when you're in your 70s, you have a perspective gained by what? Your tapes, which I call your experiences, your background, and the good and the bad and the indifferent, and the good decisions you made, the bad decisions you made, and an honest look at both yourself and how you dealt with all of the different facets of life that being an airline executive and ticket agent gives you, and what you might have done differently as you look back and say, gosh, I'm not necessarily smarter. And I want to clarify that, but I am wiser.
Yeah,
There's smart and then there's wise. And I take wisdom any day and social wisdom as opposed to academic wisdom. But you're talking to a guy that I started working at 10 years of age.
I thought you meant 10
shoveling
o'clock in the
snow.
morning. I was going to say you Americans have got a real tough old day there, haven't you?
Oh, no, in the airline industry, it's 24/7. I mean, I would keep a notepad beside me because you never know when somebody's going to call you with an accident, a crash, an event. And I've got a 1,000 of them from an airplane taken off out of Heathrow at Air Jamaica. And the captain thought maybe he should descend because of pressurization. I mean, there's a ton of these stories dating all the way back from when I was a kid till now.
But the beautiful thing, David, is right. If you look like this last year now, so many people around the world, obviously they've been affected and it's terrible and everything, but they've also spent a lot of time now watching telly, spending time with their families, thinking what they're going to do, maybe having games where they're going to go when they get the chance and what they miss and everything else. But so many people have started to look at aviation and the supply chain and everything that it brings. They've got a different interest in it. So you've got a historical review, which is great, but history is always good if it's entwined with stories and things that have happened around those historic events, which is what you've done and what we've seen in this book. But some of the points in the book, which I love, you know, you imagine if I'm just thinking now, if I was sitting in Hollywood or wherever and I was with some scriptwriters, I'd be thinking, my God, if we get all these bullet points down, and then you look at what's happened in history, and I can remember sometimes sitting in my office thinking to myself, I wish the bloody Wright brothers had been market stall holders instead, because we would never have had all these hassles. But all the things that have happened in history intertwined with what you've done is amazing. And then when you think at the airlines and the level of positions that you've had, plus the access to the people that you've had, I think it leaps out for a great box set, and God knows how many series. But if we just go through a few of the bullet point things that it would cover from the things that I know that I've read and now spoken to, but you know, looking through the lens of those 50 years, you've got terror events, you've got hijackings, you've got crashes, you've got terrible labor relations with unions. You've got bankruptcies. You've got, which companies you were CEO at, which companies could you maybe have joined? Which companies did you choose not to join because of family issues? And maybe that's something that when you play the tapes back, you think, oh my goodness me, that's a regret. So, you've got things like that, Dave, which you've got a great recollection of. But now you imagine if you're able to link those to the historic times and add a little bit of sauce and juice and color like Hollywood or Netflix or whatever is able to do. What a fantastic box set. So it trains, it teaches, it shows, it gives insights. It would be, I think it would be great.
Well, what's interesting as I'm brainstorming with you, this opportunity is you can read about events or you can live the events.
Yeah.
And I lived the events, and I would tell people from time to time when I tell stories over cocktails or something, and they'll say, you ought to write a book, or that's a movie. And I would say, folks, my life was a movie. People go to the movies to see what I did in real life. And it's true. So you take the hijackings. I was there. I was the point person. I had to deal with it. Bomb threats. Bomb blew up as I'm driving by Terminal 2 at LAX. Glass is going everywhere. And I'm the security guy as well at LAX for all the airlines for that 6-month period. So we had to evacuate the terminal. I'm stepping over dead bodies. I'm dealing with the FBI. And then when's the next bomb going to go off? And these are real situations. So it's one thing to watch it on television, but I lived it. So I can compare hijackings that people have read about to the decisions I made in the midst of a hijacking. Or an extortion where we had a bomb found on an airplane in the cockpit in JFK. And then the next one was supposed to take off. When we take off at 9 o'clock in the morning out of LA, there's supposed to be a bomb on that one.
Yeah.
So what we had to do was evacuate the terminals because we didn't know. and you're dealing with live decision making while cameras are running around television stations trying to get a spot to nail you on what are you going to do next.
Yeah.
And then a bomb blows up at midnight in Las Vegas in a cockpit. So these are real.
Yeah.
So when you think through those, you think through the Lockerbie, the 9/11. I was the decision maker in the middle of 9/11, grounding airplanes,
Yeah.
relocating crews. When do you start up again?
Yeah, and I think the thing that you've got is, like, people will remember those milestones and those terrible things. And I mean, my God, our industry has had one every 7, 8, 9 years, so we're pretty used to it. But people will remember them. But then to have that human person's insight at the same time that that was going on, that's where I think it's got great legs, you know. And going through so many different periods. So you mentioned 9/11, you know, you mentioned Lockerbie. Those are things that will never, ever be out of people's minds. People will remember where they were. It's like the Kennedy assassination. It's like major things in history. You just remember where you were. I also, Elvis Presley was another one. I remember exactly where I was when I heard the news. And it's I'm still gutted because I'm a real Elvis fan. But things like that stay with you. And then when you've got, you know, you've got different things that you've got to do to recover. You've got strikes, slowdowns, you've got picketing, you've got financial issues, raising money, IPOs, acquisitions, mergers. You've got the slot negotiations. You've got the facility deal in Madrid, I remember. Gordon of TWA on the night shift. So, you know, that's something where you're actually bringing people in as well, and showing some of these characters that are and always will be the backbone of the companies in the industry that we love so much.
Well, I was just thinking through my life and the fun I've had and the drama that I've had and the danger that I've experienced and the tough decision making, life-threatening decision making. Do you evacuate an airplane or not? Do you dispatch an airplane or not?
Yeah.
These are real life decisions and you're at the center of it. So it's one thing to read about it. It's another thing to live it. And of course, I lived it. And you have tough decision making, you have drama, you have fun, you have excitement, you have the danger of certain aspects that I had to be exposed to personally. And then you have reflecting what are the most important things that you can remember, of which there are many. Certainly the bankruptcies and the drama in the courtroom. I lived in courtroom drama, where at the last minute at Aloha, I was negotiating with the pension fund, the federal pension fund in Washington, and the judge is waiting in chambers, and I'm trying to get us out of bankruptcy, and the lawyer there won't approve it with the judge, and he resisted. So I had to get him in the men's room in Honolulu, give him my cell phone.
Sorry, I've got to let my mind go to that now. What they can do, what they can create out of that. You had to get him in the men's room.
And hand him my phone and say, your boss's boss is on the phone. And by the way, he just signed the document. Now the judge is waiting in chambers 15 minutes because this is supposed to be wrapped up. And we could not do it without the pension plan problem being resolved, because nobody's going to invest in a company with an undefined pension plan. So you hear that academically, but when you realize it, what do? You take action. I got him on the phone and I got to be good friends with his secretary. I learned another aspect of life. Whoever you're dealing with, make sure you get along well with the PA or the secretary, because they're more important. And I learned that very early in my life experiences. She gave him the phone. We got that resolved, but it took me having somebody bring him into the men's room and hand my phone to him. And I've never gotten a Christmas card from this guy, of course, but you walk back out and there's hundreds of people in the audience, and the judge comes out. And I also, 10 minutes before that, got the final write-off from ALPA with the new agreement on the pilot negotiations after like 6 months of negotiating. And the clock is ticking. So you have that sort of drama. With Lockerbie, it's still in people's minds. I got called by the London Times at the 30th anniversary, and they'd show certain people to interview and put in their Sunday supplement. And I was one of them, because I was the point guy for American Airlines in Europe when Lockerbie happened. And I got the first call, and I had to get our chairman, who was on a ski holiday, it was around the holidays. to come in, and we had a conference call with the FAA, State Department, all the airline CEOs. And this is real live stuff. And Heathrow had shut down.
Yeah.
We're trying to get the airplanes back in order. Everybody came to me because we had the best security program in Europe, because we had hired the LL people.
I remember that. Yeah.
So that was real live. So again, you might watch that on television and read about Lockerbie or see a movie about it, but you won't see somebody in that movie living that life, making those decisions at that time, real time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then other issues, which you can imagine how creative a scriptwriter could be when you're looking at locker raids, when TWA in Los Angeles for contraband, and obviously what comes after that, Jamaica with the drug lords, things like that. And I've been in places where I've had death threats and stuff because of all sorts of things, but it's most people don't ever have to experience that, thank God.
Scotland Yard had undercover people as bag loaders in Jamaica. And that's how they were able to catch a lot of folks when they came through flights where they put contraband in the belly of the airplane behind the panels.
Yeah.
And I lived that live and in person. And I had to meet with a couple of hundred ramp folks, very, very angry Jamaicans, with me in the middle, this hangar. And it was serious. I mean, I rarely get afraid, but I was close to it then when I was telling them that we might outsource their jobs. And that was an interesting meeting. And of course, going back and forth across the table with pilots and slowdowns and picketing. And when the pilots are faking write-ups to delay an airplane, they're called ghost write-ups.
Yeah.
And I finally said, you know what, I'm going to take the top 5 guys that seem to have problems and put a mechanic in the cockpit, which I did. And I get a call from San Francisco, and a captain refuses to fly with a mechanic in the cockpit, which he's not allowed to do, but So I said, put him on the phone. We got him on the phone on the jetway and said, you got 30 seconds. Your career is going to change in 30 seconds. You're either taking that airplane or you're unemployed. Your call. That was on a Wednesday. We had a meeting with the pilot union on Thursday, walked out on them twice because they gave the same old rigmarole. And we said, we are out of this. We literally left. General Lyon and I left, went into another room, and there's a knock at the door. And Secretary Peggy says, Captain Wharton thinks there's been a mistake. And General Lyon says, no, I don't think so. Tell them we're finished. I'm going to sell this airline to Frank Lorenzo or somebody else because I have a whole bunch of other businesses. I don't need this. Now, Bill and I are laughing, by the way, when the doors closed, because we know what's going to happen next. But Captain Wharton doesn't. So knock on the door a minute later. Captain Wharton actually needs to see you. So we go back in, and they're sitting and we're standing. This is in Newport Beach. Now, General Lyon ran the Air Force Reserves and was a pilot himself. And he could be a tough guy. So he gave a speech that was so tough, like you were, freshman year at the Air Force Academy or something, which is what one of them was at one time, and said everything you could say about these guys. And then said, if I leave again, it's over.
Yeah.
And they said, what do you need? I said, right now, you're going to sign a document that's going to go out to all your pilots saying, calm down, we're going to negotiate this deal, stop the ghost write-ups. He said, well, we're not causing them. We got up to leave again.
Yeah.
He said, okay, we'll do it. We got the deal done on a Sunday. 4 days later, negotiated all weekend. And in fact, on the blackboard, what we did was I said, okay, guys, and this is the creative part of what you do. You got to get out of your mindset sometimes and get more creative and not do the traditional negotiating. So I went up to the board and I said, okay, folks, what are the 10 things you don't like in this agreement? I wrote them down on the board. And then I said, now I'm going to write 10 down that we want in the document. Now, here's the eraser. I gave it to the head of the pilot. Here's the eraser. Take one of ours off, whichever one you want. And then give me the eraser because I'm going to take one of yours off. That's how we negotiated the deal. Have you ever heard it done that way? The only guy that I know that would do it that way is Herb Kelleher. And Herb and I were good friends for years. And I've heard so many stories about Herb. all of them are true. And I lived live and in person with Herb and Gordon Bethune, another interesting guy in the industry that saved Continental, when we had our quarterly CEO board meeting in Washington, D.C. with A4A. And every quarter for like 50 years, we've been having the dinner, and we invite like a congressman, a senator, a DOT secretary, off limits, and we talk about issues that we wanted to tell these folks about. And then cocktails afterwards, in the formal meeting the following morning. So Gordon and Herb Kelleher get into it over cocktails after dinner, and they love each other, and they were angry with each other, and tears were coming down my eyes, because if I had filmed that, it would have been unbelievable. Now that's real. That's two of the luminaries in the business, with me in the middle, watching them go through this debate. These are the kinds of things that you just don't see or experience. And a book in and of itself can't tell it all. You know, I wrote the book for multiple reasons. I wanted to tell the real story of the industry and what really goes on behind the curtain, and to give respect to the people within the industry that they really deserve. And they've lived through a lot. The 9/11 issue, I lost pilots that would never come back to work because of 9/11. They were too afraid, or hugging the flight attendants when the first airplane came into Minneapolis, and going on the airplane and dealing with these folks and watching the passengers change attitudes, because before then they were a little bit more belligerent, but passengers became fairly docile after that. Or when we were evacuating airplanes for a year or two in LA, and we would develop a procedure, a bomb threat procedure. You go down, move the airplane off, you go down, they say, that's my bag, it goes on, they go on. And the bags that are left, of course, go to the fire department. And we did that virtually every other day for a year, because of the hijackings and the bomb threats and the real bombs. And I recall another interesting facet of life. When I was with American and Lockerbie happened, I had to give a presentation to the board about what we're doing. And again, I was the point guy for security in Europe at the time that this happened.
Yeah.
So I gave a presentation to the board. Bob Crandall, the chairman and CEO, asked me to do that. What were we doing that was different, and why it happened to Pan Am and not us, which I did.
Yeah.
I'm walking into the boardroom, and Bob says, by the way, Chick Fisher is one of our board members, and he lost his son on Pan Am 103, as I'm getting ready to make the presentation.
Oh,
Chris was the first one to ask the question, what are you doing about mail and cargo? And as you know, it's harder to determine what flight mail is going to go on. And then the board liked that presentation, so they said, take it on the road. So I did, and I'm giving a presentation over lunch to 500 executives in Dallas sales organization. Guy asked me in Q&A, why didn't the people in Frankfurt just warn everybody there's going to be a bomb threat? I said, while we're having lunch, we probably have a bomb threat. You folks never know that, because we deal with it, and 99.9% don't matter, and we have protocols to follow. But these folks looked at me they didn't know what really went on behind the scenes. And I think the storyline, Chris, that I'm brainstorming with you is real life situations. And it's not just what you see, what you read, or what you hear, but simultaneously, I'm living what you're seeing on television and all the drama, being picketed, negotiating back and forth across the table, closing the deal with the pilots at Sunkirk at 2 o'clock in the morning in Washington, D.C., where the head negotiator came out to see me before we started at 7 o'clock at night and said, Dave, will you stay for the negotiations? And I said, if you will, I will, because he was the head of Alpha. And he said, what if we go all night? I said, then we go all night. We closed it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we went back and forth on key issues in the industry. But customers don't see that. Passengers don't see it.
no.
Doesn't see it. And they don't see how incredibly intense the industry is toward the issue of safety.
Yep.
The safety performance these days versus 50 years ago or 60 or 70 years ago is dramatic. And it's dramatic for reasons. And there are so many stories behind the reasons. Well, there's a crack in an engine. Within an hour, the entire world knows that happened in the industry.
Yeah, yeah.
And the FAA sends out an advisory directive.
Yeah.
And everybody has to conform within X period of time, or they get fined seriously. There's all sorts of issues behind safety that the general public doesn't know about, but that we deal with day to day.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, what goes on behind the scenes and behind doors, people don't get to see. But I just think now they'd be very interested to see what happened historically to get us up to where we are. Now, the other things that I've seen in there as well, and are things where you've had a very humane touch. There's the one where you were in Madrid and you looked out the window and you seen the little boy playing and you wonder what's happened to his life. Then there's the one, what was the one with the, the guy who had a drinking problem. And he was on a hearing, and part of the hearing was, or the conditions was that you put him on a program. And then by chance, 10, 12 years or whatever later, in a baggage claim, he took your bags and he refused a tip, but he said that you saved his life. And, things like that. And then there's another one from a ramp agent hearing on a drug use on the job. You put him in a program, and for 5 years on his rehab anniversary, his mother called you and thanked you. So things like that, you know what I mean? You're lucky enough to be in a position where you're able to make a decision, rightly, wrongly, or whether it would be accepted today, but to give somebody a second chance. And that second chance is probably more rewarding to you than many things where you've been given bonuses or acknowledgements. Those sort of things also come across well on the big screen. And I think that's amazing. And then, dare I say, if you don't mind, and I hope you don't blush, but, being stuck in certain areas and having to spend longer than you would have expected with other members of the crew or whatever, and a few little romantic diversions or excursions, I'm sure that there was, things like that will always come across well. And then you've got the things that people are probably more excited about is when they see somebody getting a death threat or being really, really put onto by, as you say, 200 ramp guys in Montego Bay over the outsourcing decision. That's quite something, and
Well, at Air Jamaica, Butch Stewart of Sandals and Beaches fame hired me to come down and fix the airline, and the airline's on-time performance was like 15% within 15 minutes of arrival, when the objective is 85%. We were the worst in North America, maybe the world. And I said, I'll fix it in 6 months. I fixed it in 7. And people say, well, how did you do that? Well, I had a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And one of the elements was I was on the conference call every day at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
7 days a week. And every vice president, I don't care where they were, had to be on the call. And I would ask questions. I never yelled. I didn't have to. But I had the background and the experience, from ticket agent to baggage loader to every job in between, to know what probably really happened with those delays.
Yeah.
And we actually turned the airline around, and that was only one item. I demoted some pilots. One of them went to the president of the country and demanded that I apologize and put him back in his position. And I wouldn't do that. I had the same problem in Golden Myanmar. Myanmar is kind of a dangerous country.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I demoted one of the pilots because he shouldn't have been a captain, except he was in the Air Force, and they took care of him before I got there. And the insurance company wouldn't cover our insurance unless we put him through retraining.
Yeah.
And he refused. So I fired him. And he went to the president in Myanmar, the prime minister, demanding that I put him back. I wouldn't. And in that particular case, my wife was pretty well convinced that they were going to do me under at some point. In that environment, when I checked in every night at the hotel, which the 5-star hotel, the guys with the guns are in the front, and then they put this mirror under you like they used to do in Berlin, check for bombs, and then you go through the magnetometer. And I lived that life as well. So interspersed, I think from my vantage point, it's more than just an academic discussion. It's passion, it's real life, it's what happens in the real world. In my management style, I've always felt that every person is basically the same. And I've always been that way. Maybe it's because I started by shoveling snow at 10 years of age and flipping hamburgers and driving a cab to get through college. I don't know. But in that process, I honestly believe that any individual at any point in time can match anybody else in terms of a good idea. And you have to give them and honor them for their input, regardless. I mean, politics ought to be that way today, but that's the way I ran airlines and ran people. And it's hard to explain unless you've really lived the life. For the most part, I was calm through drama. When I got the call down in operations that we had to evacuate all the terminals at LAX.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, this is what we have to do. A bomb had already blown up at Terminal 2 when I was driving by. So now we evacuate. Now the LAPD comes down, 100 of them in cadence, peeling off 10 or 20 to Terminal 2, Terminal 3, Terminal 4. And then everybody was looking for the dogs. The dogs were in short supply, right? Dogs for bombs.
Yeah.
But I had friends at the LAPD, so I got the first dogs. And then the LAPD guys there with the dogs said, okay, we need some volunteers to go in because we're unfamiliar with Terminal 3's facilities. Any volunteers? Well, of course, I was the first guy to volunteer because I felt it was my job. And a bunch of other guys joined me, ramp guys said, Dave, if you're the point guy, we're going to go in too.
Yeah.
Off we went. And by the way, there's still smoke in Terminal 2 because it just blew up. And back in that time, he put a bomb in a locker. If you notice now, you don't see any lockers at airports. Because they're all banned. But back in the day, that's what happened. They finally caught the guy, actually. So there's so many of those stories interspersed with, I'd say, lessons in leadership, humor, how to manage people, how to manage crisis. I wrote about 25 bullet points to my son when he got his graduate degree at SMU. And they're in the back of the book.
I've got them, and we're going to go through them later on.
Yeah, and it's experiences that add flavor to your life. I think when you mentioned the Wright brothers, their first flight was the length of the coach section of a 747.
Yeah.
Imagine. Now think about what these guys would think today. You remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life? Right?
Yeah.
Jimmy Stewart. Well, those guys, in some respects, gave me a wonderful life.
Yep.
Because I always wanted to see the world.
Yep.
And I had choices when I got out of college and different offers because I had a pretty good academic record. And the end result was I said, well, TWA, that's interesting. And they interviewed thousands of people, put us through shrinks, by the way. I had to go 3 days of psychological tests in New York. And they just chose 10 and put me in Chicago. So, as a ticket agent, you see things that you don't see as an executive.
Everywhere.
When you come into the industry and you don't have my kind of background and experiences, you can't make the same decisions. I go into the cockpit to this day. I can't fly in there any longer, of course, because of 9/11, but I always go into the cockpit and chat with the pilots, and they really appreciate it. And so many times the pilots have said to me, Dave, you ought to write a book. And then after that, this is a movie, because I'm in the cockpit and I point to a ramp and I said, see, guys, that's how I started. And invariably they would say, God, I wish you were our CEO, because in these days, they don't have that level of experience. Now, by the way, in fairness to CEOs, every guy in the cockpit complains about their CEO. Okay, it's like 100%. And I've got stories about, I told this one guy years ago when I was with Eric, I said, listen, can you keep a secret? He said, of course. I said, 747s. The following morning in the briefing, I'm asked about 5 times, when are we getting the 747s? He was supposed to be sworn to secrecy.
Yeah, there is nothing like that. It's crazy. Now, another thing, right? You're one of 4 siblings. There's 4 of you.
4 boys.
4 boys, and you got a twin. You got a twin.
Yeah,
one of the stories that was definitely made. It was made for film. Is the one where your twin brother was invited in by the captain of an Air Jamaica flight to come into the cockpit. Now, obviously, shouldn't have been done, insisted, etc. And then you had problems with passengers trying to do things, etc. But you can imagine where that twin brother element could take you on a particular journey within the film or a box set. So I think that's
the Air Jamaica one. That was after 9/11, and you couldn't go in unless you were the CEO, right?
Yeah.
Because he was my twin, the captain thought
he's a CEO.
And he kept bugging him. By the time he was over Phoenix, headed to LA, Brian gave in because he always wanted to do this stuff, right? And then the passengers saw it, and Brian's a celebrity on the West Coast because he was a TV guy, San Francisco news for like 30 years. He said to our station manager, "You give me 2 first-class tickets or I'm going to report you to the FAA." So they called me and I said, "Tell them we're going to get the LAP to call him for extortion." And then I called the FAA and self-disclose, which is what you do
Yeah.
anytime you have an issue. And, that was one, a vice president at TWA when I was trying to move up, thought I was drinking in the Ambassador Club in LA while I was on the job, but it was my twin brother.
Yep.
And he didn't realize it until a couple of months later that actually it wasn't Dave, it was his twin brother, or the times that he was dating when I was married and he was single, dating flight attendants. There's a whole series of interesting stories there as well.
There could be a lot of fun there, David, and I'm sure you would have been innocent in nearly all of them. But just the thought that perhaps it was you and not the brother would keep the viewers on the end of their seats, mate, on the edge of their seats. Now, another thing that I thought was great as well is in the roles you were in, and also in that sort of a life, and when people think back and they talk about the golden years or the great years, etc. Flight was such an incredible experience, and it still is for everybody. But back then, it was for the privileged few, and then it opened up for everybody. But during that time, and I'm thinking about my mother even as well. My mother, God bless her, she worked in the lounges for British Airways, and she kept a scrapbook and everything. The people she met, even Mike Tyson wrote something really, really nice. And believe you me, I think even Mike Tyson would have thought twice about going up against my mother. But things like that are incredible. But the people that you met, so, you look at the like Rock Hudson, Zaza Gabor, OJ Simpson, Bob Hope, you got.
I sat for 2 hours with OJ Simpson in the lounge at LAX. And he was hilarious. This was before, of course, Nicole Simpson and that whole problem. But he was doing Naked Gun and Naked Gun 2.5. I had lunch with Helen Hayes, who was actually in the original Airplane movie.
Yeah.
And she kept trying to stow away on the airplane. So I'm sitting with her at lunch. And I set it up so that one of my guys went up to Helen Hayes and said, "Excuse me, madam, but you're not going to stow away on one of my airplanes." And she goes into her actress mode.
Yeah.
And goes through the whole process. Or Charlie Chaplin, what a crazy day that was when he got the award and we had to put him on an airplane. There's so much drama, fun, excitement, etc. in the jobs that I have done. I can't imagine having any other job. And when I was young, I said I wanted to go see the world. And I got to see the world.
That's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Me too. Do you know what I'm saying? I grew up, we had very little. I never thought about anything, fell into the business by chance, got a lucky break with Lufthansa, and I've traveled all over the world. I've lived in loads of countries. I've experienced so much, all thankfully down, to being lucky enough to get into this industry. And I've got some stories myself as well. So maybe I can sling a few of them into your box set. But another thing was the FBI sting in Los Angeles, and also the naked female coming off a flight in San Francisco. The guy who threw the waste bin through the window, the big old lump, and then lots of things that you did with firsts. So I believe you were the first person, you employed a female
ramp supervisor.
First one
in the industry.
First one in the industry.
And then I cleaned up the swing shift with this fella. I was having problems on the swing shift in LA. I had like 1,000 employees, and there was theft and poor baggage delivery and so on. So I took the meanest, toughest, biggest guy, Gordon. He used to be a linebacker.
That's right, Gordon the Giant.
San Diego. And I said, "Gordon, I'm going to make you the lead." He said, "What, me?" I said, "Trust me, I'll help you out." Then I made him a supervisor. And it worked. The LA sting was because people were stealing bags and flights from Vegas into LA. People kept the coins and some of the money that they made in their bags. So they'd check them down. So we set up some bags from Las Vegas, and we put dust powder on them that you could read ultralight. And so we're up in the 10 o'clock at night up in the Admirals Club, the Ambassador Club, with scopes looking down into the baggage delivery area with the FBI. And we saw the guys and we checked their hands. And of course, they were guilty and we fired them. And there was a guy that was from Philadelphia, where I was from. And he'd come into my office because I put my office, when I was running the ramp with baggage loaders and cleaners and so on, next to the time clock so that I could get to chatter. And he'd come in and sit down and say, Dave, you know, we're doing great. I said, Joe, I think you're drinking on the job and I think you're stealing. Dave, I wouldn't do that to you. I said, Joe, sooner or later. So it's not a couple of weeks later, I get a call at 9 o'clock at night. He's in jail. And what happened was he stole a case out of Las Vegas, bag case with some coins. It's stuck in his trunk. And he goes, leaves work, and he goes and gets drunk and he kills somebody.
Oh, good Jesus.
And I get the call. And I never forgot it. He's probably either in jail or dead now, but I couldn't help Joe. But I have helped other people, and I've also fired a lot of people. And you know, when I went to Aloha, we had 24 vice presidents.
Yeah.
And we had no money. I mean, no money. We couldn't even mail out checks. We were broke. $500 million company, and we were broke. And I had to take action in the first week. The first day, I met with all the key leaders in the union, because that's what you have to do. Then I met with the bank, who we owed him $60 million. He was really mad at me. And I said, I don't even know you. You can't be mad at me the first day, for heaven's sakes. And I'll get you your $60 million back that we owe you. And if I do, I want a statue 20 feet long outside my office in Honolulu. Well, I got him a $60 million back, and I didn't get a statue, by the way.
I can imagine.
Frustrated.
I can imagine. No, but it's like I say, there's so many things that you could put in, you know, and then obviously the stations abroad and the countries that you live in. Countries go through different times. So I can also remember when I spent some time in South America with Lufthansa. Colombia was a terrible place, and Venezuela, Caracas especially, was like being touted as, you know, a wonderful European city, which it was. It was absolutely beautiful. And then it flips over, you know, you got Mexico changing, and to see all of these things, and, you know, to travel around Africa, the Far East, it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing. So coming back to what you referred to about the wonderful life, it's the same sort of principle. Had the Wright brothers not got on that plane, or not did what they did, had some of the other people through aviation history, the pioneers, not done what they did, you wouldn't be having the experiences you've had. I wouldn't. So many other people's lives would have been affected, and we would have missed out on so much, you know. And
you mentioned Caracas before I forget. I come back from being in Europe on a road trip. And while I was gone, Crandall had an executive committee meeting, and we were opening up Caracas.
Yeah.
And so I show up at the meeting, and Bob says, by the way, we're opening up Caracas, and that's going to be one of your responsibilities. And I said, I guess because I was out of the room when the decision was made, I get Caracas, right? So I go down to Caracas, bad place. And one of the things we had to do was give lie detector tests.
Yeah.
To all the employees.
Yeah.
50% of them failed. 50%.
Yeah.
Because what they do is somebody would give them $10,000 and say, stick this in a bag and let it go through. And a guy at JFK is going to pick it up.
Yeah. No, I know.
Dangerous place.
You know, when you go through that tunnel from the airport to Caracas, you know, the tunnel that are coming out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I shared a car. This guy, we got there really late. Flight was delayed. I shared a car with him. And we're going through, and the driver was there, and all of a sudden the driver shouted, duck, and we ducked, and a rock came through the windscreen. Okay. And they were trying to just slow a car up or stop a car, you know, to try and rob you. My goodness me. I thought that's the first time I've been there. I couldn't believe it. It was amazing.
Well, there's tough areas around the world. I think I've seen a lot of them, I can assure you. And when you're in the airline business and airports specifically, you see so much.
Yeah,
you see the good, the bad, the ugly, and of course, with the COVID situation, the tensions are even higher than they've always been. When a passenger walks into the airport, he's already sensitive because he's out of his element.
Yeah,
and you have to manage that. And we train people in value analysis techniques, and then we also train them in "I'm okay, you're okay" transactional analysis, which basically says,
oh my God,
if somebody's upset, you need to calm them down, and here's how you do it. Treat them as an adult. And so we trained everybody in one of the airlines I was running in how to deal with passengers at every level. And of course, these days, if you do the wrong thing, you're getting filmed and you're going to be on NBC, ABC,
Yeah.
CBS Nightly News as a flight attendant. So it's always been tough, but it's a different environment now. And part of the reason for the book was to tell the stories, the real life stories about the employees of this industry and what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. They're a special group of people.
Yeah. You did the I'm okay, you're okay course, yeah?
Yep.
I had two of the most obnoxious, rude, ignorant dickheads, okay, teaching that when I went through it. And I tell you what, I could have thrown either of them through the window. I'm okay, you're it, but they obviously missed some sort of the guidelines, because they were the worst trainers I have ever experienced.
No, I hired some really good people, and we put the flight attendants and ticket agents through it, and then we filmed transactions where a flight attendant is telling somebody to put their cigarette out, and they yell at them, and one flight attendant treats them as a child, and the other one treats them as an adult, and the results are different. And that kind of training probably is missed a little bit today, because it's really vital in human transactions. Another one that I went through was what they call cockpit management resources. And we train pilots and co-pilots into interactions between the two, because there have been accidents, not as much anymore because of this training, but a co-pilot is subservient to a captain, especially in third world countries or in the air Malaysians.
Yeah.
So they don't want to dispute a decision, a life-threatening instant decision by a captain. So we've trained them to interact in that situation. We had a tail strike at Air Jamaica where the captain was supposed to be told Miami, Kingston, or Montego Bay to Kingston, supposed to be told to move the passengers forward to balance the airplane out of Montego Bay to Kingston. Well, he never got the message. So it was tail heavy. So when he rotates and takes off, he goes straight up and the tail strikes, and co-pilot was female. And that airplane was out for a couple of months. They could have lost the airplane, except she did a marvelous job at saving it. I interviewed the crew afterwards, and that's a real life drama.
Yeah. And like you said, because people are too frightened, and cultures and whatever, to say somebody who's senior isn't doing something good, which is another thing. Now, you did a lot of good, and you've got a lot of excitement, and with all that exposure through history, through ever, comes temptation, which you were also brave enough to put in the storyline. And you also had a little excursion that ended up in a divorce. And those are things that color lives, they color stories, and they color books. And they're the things that also have to be left in.
Well, I certainly wouldn't disparage anybody as part of the process, but the fact is, people in my position get exposed, and I guess you saw it in some of the movies of the 70s and the 80s, but in the airline business, it's very unique in many respects. I mean, you're flying all over the world. You meet a lot of very interesting people, and the temptations are more significant than probably being a dentist, or however you want to characterize it. And I guess I've had more than my share of experiences on the personal side, and some of them ended up in poor situations, probably in part because of errors I made in judgment, which I'm willing to admit because they're facts. And I'm not the only one. I mean, I may be the only one willing to talk a little bit about it, but I'm hardly the only one. And I think it's an interesting combination of how you're dealing with business issues, personal issues, exposure to all facets of life. And, let me give you an example. At Aloha, I'm on the front pages all the time. And we had like 4,000 employees, and you're kind of like maybe a big fish, certainly in that part of the world. And you get exposed pretty significantly to a lot of interaction with the opposite sex, and challenges to manage that and at the same time do your job. And that was just a sliver of an entire life, which was interspersed with personal challenges, as well as
which
real life business challenges.
which is why you said at the beginning, you said the best, something about the best school or university of life. There's three, in my opinion. It's academic, it's age, and it's travel.
Well, you mentioned Madrid's opening. I was like 25 or 26, and I did the Madrid opening where I challenged the president of Iberia, and he wanted to get slots in LA, and I got to know the Deputy Secretary of State to give out slots. And he wouldn't let us have ticket counter space. So I said, well, you're not going to be able to fly to LA unless you do that.
Yeah.
And he said, no, we had approval. I said, no, you don't, because I just met with the State Department last week. And no, you don't. Unless you give me ticket counter space in Madrid, you're not going to LA.
Yeah.
And my friend Jeff Shane and I had dinner the week before and coordinated all this. Well, guess what? He fired his attorney in Washington, president of Iberia, when he found out the truth. Anyhow, he got the slots and I got the ticket counter space. But my first experience was at the Baraja Hotel, which you mentioned, in Madrid.
Yeah.
I was like 26, and I was part of a training team to train managers internationally in value analysis and improved expense control and so on. And I felt very alone. So I'm in the bar, and all the other guys, older folks on the other side, and I look out the window, and this is before Madrid built up, and there's a kid out walking his sheep. And I looked out there and I wrote something down. I've actually written a lot of things separately, which you haven't seen yet. And I said to myself, I saw a child the other day, a lad of 5 or so, and I watched him as he played. For just a while, I saw myself as once I must have been. To only wonder, what became of him? And that's the story of my life. What became of him? Because in all the chapters and all the experiences, you go through differences in life, like everybody does.
Yeah.
Mine seems to be more pronounced because of the nature of my jobs and the industry.
Yeah.
And you sometimes ask yourself, when you're 60, what would I tell that guy if I could talk to him again when he's 40?
Yeah.
What would I tell him?
I wish I was what I was when I wished I was what I am.
Yeah.
The best prize of all is youth and having everything ahead of you. And the trouble is, when you're in there, all you want to do is get as fast, as quickly as you can to where you think you want to be. It's an incredible thing, but it'll be a great book, a great life story. And you mentioned there about the things that you did for your son and for your kids. And I just want to go through them. I know it's out of sequence to what we were doing, but in Appendix A, I'm just going to read them out because I think they're lovely. And you told me what you did with them, which is even nicer. But always be a team player, give to others, put your family first, manage adversity, stay in touch with people, plan for your children's education. An interesting one, which I think is great, find mentors, save every business card, which is a good one. And if for those who do, when you look back on them and you come across them and you go through them, you realize there's some great people there that you should have kept in touch with, and it gives you the initiative to do so. Yeah. This one I'm not so sure of, but read 5 newspapers a day.
I read 10.
Oh my God almighty, fair play to you, my friend, fair play to you. Recognize other people's achievements, engage strangers at dinner parties in conversation. I love that because you learn so much, and then you also meet some incredible people. Amazing. Be nice to everyone on the way up, pay your bills, travel, go to church. My mother would be so pleased to hear if that's what happened. Yeah. Watch dumb old movies. I love them because that's what makes you escape, and it's brilliant. Invest part of your treasure in memories, 100%. Those who go through the ages, if you can sit on that rocking chair on that deck and have a smile on your face because your memories keep you company, it's far better than being lonely but with a bank full of dollars.
Well, my thought process there was, in a very simple statement, you can buy things and they generally depreciate in value.
Yeah.
You buy memories based upon your experiences and they appreciate in value. And,
yeah.
And nobody can take them away. They can take away your house, They cannot take away your memory.
Yeah. And then you've got don't touch your 401k, which for people who've never lived in the US, that's your like your pension fund, your investment fund. Exercise, stay healthy, and watch what you eat and drink. Double snuggle your kids. What a lovely one that is. And there's an ironic one here, and I'm assuming you used the word at the front. You didn't put do not get divorced. You put try not to get divorced. So fair play. Yeah, that was a nice one. Smile and always tell those you love how much you care. And I think in this day and age, as we're coming out of COVID and people are seeing all the terrible things that are happening, and God bless all these poor people in India at the moment, the most important thing is tell people what you think, tell them how much you love them, and tell them how much you care.
Well,
And,
the reason I mentioned the smile was, imagine you're taking Aloha Airlines through bankruptcy. And when I filed it on a Friday just before the end of the year. And I had a press conference at 3 o'clock while the lawyer was walking the papers into the judge. So nobody knew about it. And I had called the head of the FAA, got her in her car, Marion Blakey, because the FAA instantly says, well, if they're going bankrupt, how's their safety? So they send inspectors out. So you want to get ahead of the curve with the senator, mayor, the whole governor and so on. But could you imagine if your CEO is walking around for the next year, grumpy and frowning? You're very worried. And I always had a smile on my face, even if I didn't feel it as much, but I was always up anyhow. It's hard to explain, but in those situations, you're always up. And as we're getting ready to come out of bankruptcy, I started a new ad campaign, and one of our top lawyers, Paul Singerman out of Miami, who helped us through the chapter 13 or chapter 11, said, why are you getting ready to plan a party for your employees and a new ad campaign? I said, because we're going to come out of bankruptcy. He said, but we don't have investors yet. I said, yeah, but we will.
Yeah.
So we need to plan this stuff in advance. And he said, I've never met anybody so positive in the face of adversity. And I was having lunch with Norm Mineta when he was Secretary of Transportation under Bush. He's the one that grounded the airplanes at 9/11. And he's a good friend of mine for years. And we're having lunch up in his private, fancy dining room office for secretaries overlooking the Capitol. And he looked at me and said, Dave, why do you take all these hard jobs? Because you seem to be the guy taking Pan Am through bankruptcy or trying to fix Sun Country. And I was talking to him about Northwest Airlines trying to put Sun Country out of business through pricing initiatives. And I thought it was illegal. And he said, I don't know anybody quite like you and why you do what you do. And this is the Secretary of Transportation speaking. Who want to know? He had been chairman of the Aviation Subcommittee in Congress for years. And so he knew a lot about what was going on in the industry. And I said, I see it as a challenge. And people seem to call me when they're in trouble. And I guess it's my experiences.
But it's also, Dave, you've hit on something here, which I've looked back on as well. And I think depending what's happening and where you are, it's a little bit like the military. If things are really bad, you need somebody to go in. It's a little bit like the commandos or the ones who go in and try and push the enemy back and disrupt it. Then you get the engineers who come in and settle everything down. Then you get the guys who come in and the peacekeepers. And then you get the marketing guys and the politicians. And it's like that in business. So depending where the company is at a certain time or what's happening, you have a different type or a different style of manager. And I think that's also been apparent now in the pandemic, because there's been lots of changes. Doesn't necessarily mean the people that were there aren't good enough. It just means that they're not best suited or best skilled for that particular type of an issue. And, their time will be somewhere else for a different reason. So,
well, when I took over Aloha, we had 24 vice presidents, as I mentioned. Within 30 days, we were down to 12. And I replaced some of those 12 with other people. But my first day on the job, which I always enjoy those days, I looked around at the table and there's 24 vice presidents and a couple of board members were at the meeting. And I said, listen, guys, the rule book is really simple. We don't have a rule book. But having said that, here's the one rule. You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal, and you don't screw the guy next to you. Because if you play politics, I will know it. And I don't care what your talent is, you're out.
Yeah.
A month later, two vice presidents were going at it about who was going to run the San Diego inaugural.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, I'm sorry, you didn't hear what I said. And I fired that person
Yeah.
on the spot.
Yeah.
Because it needed to be done.
Yeah, I must admit, yeah, there's people with, like we've said before, you know, the ego of a 747 and the hanger of a Cessna. And I think, you know, it's like if you've got a little bit of poison on the tip of your finger, cut the damn thing off before it spreads. Because once it spreads, it's very difficult to get rid of all the impacts.
I was at a presentation for investors, AirCal, after I did the IPO, and we're having a dinner at the York Hotel in Toronto with the Queen.
Yeah.
When she's there. And our CFO was making part of the presentation, and he gets up for his part of the presentation, and he goes, blah, 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 blah. I said, what? He was drunk. Okay, so then we go in to the ante room to have after dinner drinks with major people in Canada. Okay, guy that ran the railroad, a famous football star. They own 10% of the company. And I'm at the sofa, and the investment banker is on my right, Jonathan Cabbage, and the CFO is on my left. And the CFO passes out in my lap while we're having after dinner drinks with the people that own the company. And everybody's looking at, what is Dave going to do?
Yeah.
Dave didn't do anything. He just let the guy fall asleep in my lap. So I think it's probably time we wrap up. And went to bed. And in the morning, he gets on the airplane. He's down in the lower galley chasing the flight attendants. He wouldn't stop smoking cigarettes and so on. Anyhow, the bottom line is I called the chairman and co-chairman and said, I'm firing our CFO this afternoon. And the story, is that okay with you guys? He said, that's your call. The point of it all, Chris, everybody in that room was going to wonder, what is Dave going to do?
Yeah.
What will he decide in that situation? And that's the way it is in life. And that's the way it is in my experiences. People watch you, not by what you say, but what you do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
With the decision making that you make, are you being fair? Have you listened to everybody? Have you gotten
Yeah.
all the different aspects of the issue? That safety committee at Aloha for the pilots said there was a problem with one of the airplanes that didn't fly exactly right. So I said, well, let's take that airplane on Saturday morning, you and me and a couple of mechanics and our chief pilot, let's fly out over the islands and do rolls and test to see exactly what's wrong with that airplane. And the head of the pilot's safety committee said, you'll go up with us? I said, absolutely, let's go.
Yeah.
That's what we did. There was a fault and we corrected the fault.
Yeah.
I don't know how many CEOs do that sort of thing, but that's what I do.
Yeah. But it's also, you know, it's different times and everything. But I think to end, and something that could be said on the show or the whatever it turns out to be, and please God it will do, is, can I please start all over again? Wouldn't it be lovely?
Well, life doesn't work that way, does it?
I know.
And then you wonder.
Be nice, though, huh?
Well, perhaps kind of like watch what you wish for, because I think the way we as human beings is part of the human condition, and people go through phases of their life, which I really believe, from immaturity to maturity to old age and everything in between. And what really frames us are our experiences. And we make judgments based in part about how we were raised, our experiences, what we've learned from our experiences, what I call our tapes.
Yeah.
And so the evolution of a person through various stages of their life and their various positions is interesting in many respects. But if you're somebody like me that has seen the world, has done so many different jobs, been in so many different situations, drama, fun, terror, excitement, tough decision-making, hijackings, bomb threats, negotiations, being picketed, being threatened with your life, and everything in between, and giving speeches around the country to raise money to take an airline public, and standing up in front of those folks. I did one at the World Trade Center up at the top floor. And in the middle of the presentation, the light bulb goes out. So what did I learn from that? Every other presentation had 2 light bulbs and 2 projectors, anywhere we went in the world, including Paris, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Yeah. I've been on the same situation. We started a conference, put the first few slides up, and I was moderating an opening, and all the everything went. So I had to tell jokes and try and do whatever. But no, I'd like if I managed to go up to the pearly gates and whoever was up there and said, I can let you do one thing, what would it be? I'd say I'd like to start over again. And who knows, maybe that'll be the title of A Man in Aviation. Let me start all over again. But listen, I hope you get the chance to do something, because like I say, the book's great fun. And like you said earlier, everybody's got a book in them, but most people don't get around to finish it. And you finished it. I've enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. And so I've got to apologize to Salem that we went off-piste. But I just thought, what a great time. Plus, it's the weekend of the Oscars. So, everybody's been talking about whether they were good, bad, or indifferent, but they were definitely different. And so next session, Advancing Technology, Chapter 9, Session 10, we're back on track. So
I would mention one final point, Chris. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for travel because of COVID.
Yeah.
And there's always been a phenomenal interest in the airline industry. And when you go to a cocktail party, people may talk about different things, but invariably it comes around to their airline experience. So it's always topical. The airline industry is always topical, and maybe even now more than ever.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, and it takes you on your dreams. It takes you to see people you love. It takes you for it's so much. And it's a little bit, I loved the film Love Actually, because at the end they do all that bit where they're seeing people hugging and kissing and pleased to see each other, and it gets bigger and bigger, or smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's what it's all about.
You know who the lady that wrote that book is? My neighbor in Malahide. Did you know that?
Is she?
Yeah.
In Malahide?
Her father was head of the country for a while. Ahern.
Oh, really? Oh, blimey.
Yeah, she's right.
Oh,
In fact, I gave her a copy of my book.
Did you? I love that Love Actually. If ever I want to go have a good laugh and everything, I just think that was such a tremendous film. Brilliant. She's
done very well by it, and she's a very nice person. I spent about an hour with her at a cocktail party when I first met her in Dublin.
Did you?
And she's a wonderful person.
Does she come into Gibney's?
She's been in Gibney's, I'm sure, but she's not very social that way. This was a private cocktail party around Christmas, but she's.
But when I come over to see you, I'd love to meet her, because that film has given me and my family, especially my daughter, it's given us such good fun. Been brilliant. Listen,
she wrote the book that made the film.
Yeah. Maybe that'd be nice. Dave, listen, please God, something will come from it. If it does, please give me a walk-on part as whatever, something to do with the aviation industry. And let's hope somebody listens and somebody feels that it's worthwhile doing. So without further ado, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. We'll be back on track. And Salem, apologies that we went off-piste, my friend. Just one of those things.
Take care.
Take care. All the best.